Hello, Internet. This is Daniel with Driving and Dragons, and today, coming to you with a little bit of a short one. This is a bit of a response to the OGGM. He posted a live video earlier today that I'll link below. He does these kind of videos sometimes where he's just walking down through the neighborhood and live streaming while he's doing it. In this case, he was talking about what is the OSR, the definition of it, what does it mean, and I figured it was something that I'd like to weigh in on because, while there's no super official definition, it's pretty easy to kind of parse what the OSR is. It's just that it's a vaguely defined term. So, while the buckets are pretty easy to understand, the different meanings of OSR, what actually fits in them can be a little bit of a debate and some place where you can argue back and forth and see some difference of opinion. 280ZX, we're going to do some work here on our valve train, and we should actually be getting pretty deep into that valve job. I'm actually kind of excited about the valve cover painting videos, just because it kind of ties back into the tabletop role-playing game thing. I don't play with miniatures. I'm a theater of the mind guy, but you get a lot of people out there with just miniature painting videos, and you're not going to really see that from me because I don't play with minis. But at least you can get some car part painting videos, and I think I did a pretty good job on this. It needs some touch-up, but I'm really kind of stoked about it, and some people have seen some pictures of it already and think that the valve cover transformation was pretty slick on that car. So let's move forward on this OSR thing. First off, let's just go ahead and put it out there. OSR. There are two primary definitions of that acronym: Old School Renaissance and Old School Revival. These are more or less one and the same. Old School Renaissance is more the phenomena of old school style gaming coming back to the forefront. It is experiencing a renaissance. It is coming back from the brink of kind of falling out of favor. And then, of course, revival being more the verb form, more the reference to the active participation in reviving that old school style of game and digging it back up and bringing it back to life. So one is a lot more passive, renaissance. It is just the observation that there is a renaissance happening. Revival is a lot more active, which is the firsthand act of going out and making it come back. So when you're talking about old school OSR, you kind of have to have old school defined first. And old school is really pretty simple. It's simple, but it's not simple because people are going to argue about it. This is one of those things where here's the bucket, here's the box, but everybody argues about that Overton window. The Overton window is a concept in society where you have this spectrum of different topics. For instance, you have a spectrum politically from left to right. Far left ideas, far right ideas. The Overton window is the range of positions and topics where most of the bell curve fits and where most people are going to find that reasonably acceptable to talk about in the Overton window. The things that are outside the Overton window are going to be things that are so far left that even most of the left doesn't agree with, whereas on the right end it'd be the same thing. That long-winded discussion of what the Overton window is, same thing with old school. Old school simply means that it is the older generation of play or design style, like game design style. So either play style or game design style of an older era. Now, how far back you have to go to get to old school is up for debate and discussion. But if you ask me, tabletop role-playing games essentially have three eras. You have what I call the Gygax era, the wargaming era, which is where it all came from. This is where original Dungeons & Dragons, White Box, and the very beginning of tabletop role-playing games came from. And it had a very heavy wargaming base. This is what we call these days hack and slash, dungeon crawling, roguelike, where it's all about going in and experience points, levels. It's all in the books, and the storytelling is a very minor aspect of it. in that, like I said, it's essentially take a war game where you control an army or a unit or whatever, scale it down to where you control an individual soldier who becomes a hero soldier. That's your Gygaxian D&D, your Gygax era, first era wargaming. The second era is the Hickman Revolution. It's the Hickman era. This is where the concept of having a narrative-based play came from, where the story began to matter, where you started looking at more adapting things to fit your world and creating worlds for it and going away from the heavily measured aspect of things where grids and distances became less important. Theater of the mind became more of a thing. And where you have, like I said, the story and narrative elements became important. And it became less of random encounter tables and this is what happens in this room and this is what happens in that room, versus monsters that are smart and move around, enemies and NPCs that have real living personalities and behave like human beings as opposed to behaving like just another part of the puzzle or the game. And it comes from Tracy Hickman, and more importantly, it really, really hits its running stride with Dragonlance and Ravenloft, and particularly Ravenloft. When Strahd von Zarovich moved around throughout the castle, that was like, boom, mind blown for early TTRPG players. For him to change the way he behaved and act based on what the players were doing, holy crap, we've never seen this kind of thing. That's why it's called the Hickman Revolution. It moved away from that static wargaming style. And then you have the third era, which is the story gaming era. It really started to develop sometime in the early, mid-2000s, mid to late 3.5 edition stuff with like your White Wolf Gaming. And it moved in, it really took hold and ran with it in the tabletop role-playing games. Like when Pathfinder 1 was really taking hold and starting to really rival D&D for that very short period of time, for that pinnacle of sales and whatnot, and when 5th edition started to become a thing, this is where the story gaming era really took root. And the story gaming era is where, as you'll hear derisively amongst a lot of older players, the drama class style came from, where the only thing that matters is the story, and it's all about characterization, and everything has been kind of scaled down, backburnered, and pushed off in favor of the story. It's actually kind of funny that Tracy Hickman occupies the middle of the three eras, because in the Dragonlance novels, spoiler alert, one of the big themes is the swinging pendulum of balance. And for him, it's everything moving from too much good swinging through the neutral up to too much evil, swinging back through more neutrality up to too much good again. And you have the good era where there's too much good, which led to intolerance and everything being not good enough. So the king priest is literally, the king priest comes out and says that the great God of good is not good enough because he isn't willing to trample down the rights of other people to force them to be good. Ironically, an evil thing, tyranny. So the pendulum's too far there. Swinging back through neutrality, where things are kind of balanced, up to too much evil, where evil has the power and things are tyrannical, freedoms are trampled, slavery becomes a thing, and, people are exploited. So if you look at that in the terms of the TTRPG game, you have the story gaming era, where everything is linear, you have the Gygax era, the wargaming era, where everything is rules, everything is super linear, everything is combat or ability or in-game focused, things are super static. You have good things there, like real consequences for actions. You die easy. You're challenged. That it simulates something. Versus all the way far on the story gaming side where, as they say in Whose Line Is It Anyway, the games are made up and the rules don't matter. So you find the balance in the middle, and that balance in the middle of those philosophies is the Hickman era, and I find that to be very apropos. So now that we kind of have a definition of old school, what does OSR itself, what can it refer to? Well, really it refers to three things. First are OSR games, old school revival or old school renaissance games. These are new games, new play styles, or new playstyle guides and supplements that are designed to emulate old school play. So when you start talking about stuff from RPG Pundit like Baptism of Fire, when you start talking about your Mort Borts and your, just your games that are designed, your Castles and Crusades that are designed to emulate older games. So they're designed to be more like first edition Dungeons and Dragons, AD&D, second edition AD&D, Cyberpunk, not Cyberpunk Red, but Cyberpunk 2020 to a certain extent, Call of Cthulhu, games that are designed to either emulate those or replace them, or are based on those same design principles, either the wargaming principles of Gygax era or the narrative gameplay Hickman Revolution style era. Those are OSR games. They're either directly based on, directly copying, or are at least designed specifically to call back to those old school eras. 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons is in no way an old school game. However, when you look at some of these supplements that are designed to bring in more damaging monsters, more strict death rules, more limited player abilities that are designed to more strictly control simulationism within the game to make it more simulationism, less story, invest more power in the game master, supplements that are designed to help adapt 5th edition for one-to-one time and that sort of thing. Those are going to be OSR in the gaming sense. Second use of OSR is going to be the OSR movement. When you were referencing the old school Renaissance movement or old school revival movement, that is a general movement of players and designers and whatnot is the general movement that holds that TTRPGs need to move back towards the older styles of play. So going back to the Dragonlance example of the swinging pendulum, this is the movement and the people who support a movement that says, hey, we have gone too far into narrative play, we've gone too far into player agency obsession, we have gone too far into the video gamey aspect of it where it's all about the story and in service to the story and that sort of thing. Hey, we need to pull this back into more game-like play. We need, narrative is great, but we need to be more rules-based. We need to be more simulationist. We need to understand that, as they say, shit happens. So maybe you wanted to have the big epic story, but you died. And rolls happen, that sort of thing. So that's your OSR movement of the general movement of TTRPGs need to return to an older style and design philosophy. And then last but not least, you have the OSR community. OSR can refer to the community. This is what you hear when you hear Clown Door DM complaining that the OSR doesn't like him, or when you hear OGGM say that apparently he's been kicked out of the OSR. And that is the OSR community is the group of influences, creators, and gamers who put a heavy weight and are heavily influenced by older design and playstyles. OSR, the movement, is the general attitude of we need to move back to that. The OSR community is those actual people who are pushing that OSR movement, leading that movement, advocating for that movement. These are the actual people who are designing those OSR games. These are the influencers who are preaching the OSR movement. These are the people who are saying that Gygax or Hickman or a combination of the two really had it right and that we need to move back away from the story gaming era. So that's really my kind of take on this. It's a little bit longer than I thought it would be, but you just got your basic OSR primer right there. OSR means old school renaissance or revival, depending on if you want the passive or the active. Old school means that it's dedicated to an older generation of play or design style. TTRPGs essentially have three eras: Gygax, Hickman, and Story Gaming era. And old school means that you really want to move back to one of those prior areas. Where that Overton window lies, what exactly fits into it, is a matter for debate. And then, of course, the OSR can refer to the games themselves and the style guides and supplements. It can refer to the movement, that we need to go back to those older styles, or it can refer to people like I would consider myself an old school or a part of the OSR community. What it doesn't mean is white nerds in their basement that Kyle Brinks thinks needs to get out of the hobby. So that's what I got to say. What do you think? Tell me down below. Like, share, subscribe. I'll see you guys next time.